mute everybody and we will start the year. Let me mute everybody. Hold on. Okay, so everybody should be muted except for me. That's the plan. Let me put myself as the main screen on here so people can see me when they're watching on Facebook. Okay, good evening, everybody. We have some hot off the press news that I would like to share with everybody, since it was announced tonight at the Binyan that as we've started our afternoon minchas, we are going to be having a Friday afternoon mincha, followed by the beginning of Kabbalat Shabbat. We asked tonight for the people who are here, and Baruch Hashem, we had a minyan. So the Friday afternoon Zoom event that we used to have will be a live minyan. I think we were thinking of changing the time. I'm not sure the exact time. The weekday davening's been 6:45, but if we're not davening Mariv, we could daven a little bit earlier. And then if we don't bring in Shabbos, people can then drive home and then continue whatever malacha, whatever they want to do, until obviously the time that Shabbos comes in. And the reason why we're doing it that way, as opposed to davening Mariv as well, is because if we daven Mariv, then people obviously have to walk home, which they would do obviously anyway when we come to shul, but people have been carrying their own chairs and have been carrying their own sidurim, I mean, you know, bringing them with. So obviously if they come and they have to walk home, they're not going to schlep their chairs home, right? It's a long way, and especially, you know, they want to sit down. So we feel at the moment we'll start just with the mincha, and then people can then go into Mariv and do that at home, but at least we can have a binyan for mincha. And if there's any other ways that we're going to spruce it up, I'm sure we will let you know. Also, we have so many people on. Unfortunately, some sad news today with one of our members, Jeffrey Rosenberg's father was nifta. I'm sure you saw the email and heard the recording. He is still in Florida. He's sitting obviously shiva all the time, but he's having a meet and greet, if you call it that. I'm not sure what you want to call it, a shiva visit between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. outside in the parking lot in front of his house at Glen Eagles. I was there today before I came to shul. It's a bit like they do on a Shabbos afternoon. For those who live in Glen Eagles will know that everyone sits around at a socially distanced way. He was sitting on his low chair. The details were in the email, so if people feel comfortable doing that, they can. If not, there are a couple of Zoom times, and obviously you can phone him as well if you want to do the mitzvah of Nichum Avel. Okay, so death is the topic a little bit of what I wanted to talk about tonight, and I want to bring it connecting to the Sedra and connected to current events. But first, this week is with something is happening that has not happened for 12 years. Not happened since 2008. It's very rare, and it never ever happens in Israel. So if you ask an Israeli, is Parshas Balak, Chukas and Balak ever together? He will laugh at you. Say, what are you talking about? They're never together. And the answer is, he's right. In Israel, the two Parshas, Chukas and Balak, are never read together. In Chutz La'aretz, they are read together on occasional years. So, knock my mouse on the floor. Okay, let's see. So in the Shulchan Aruch, it's very interesting. Those who are learning the Daf Yomi, I know Mendy learns the Daf Yomi, and Harry learns the Daf Yomi, and whoever else learns the Daf Yomi will know that yesterday the Gemara says, who is a Talmud Chacham worthy of leading a yeshiva? It says somebody that you could ask a question in any place and he'll know the answer, right? Remember that, Mendy? So the Chassam Sofer says it doesn't literally mean he knows the answer to every single question off the top of his head. I mean, that's a little bit difficult to say. There are very few people like that. But it means B'chol is a strange expression. You ask him B'chol Mokom in any place. So the Chassam Sofer says it means he knows where to get the answer. Either he knows where to look it in a sefer, or he knows who to call. They used to make, I suppose you could call it a joke. They used to say, the previous generation, all the rabbis in America needed to know was Moshe Feinstein's telephone number. And any question they had, they could just ask him, and he would be able to answer it for them. But something this week is happening, and if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, you'll find it at the end of Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, which is at the end of the Mishnah Berurah Chelik Daled, Siman Tov Chof Ches 428. And this is where it talks about the Haftorahs. If you look to find the halachas of which Haftorahs we read when, you will not find it in the Hilchos Shabbos when it talks about the Haftorah. You will not find it in the weekday when it talks about laning in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch. You will find it at the end of Rosh Chodesh when it talks about how we set up the Jewish year. So it's just good to know that if you're ever looking, where am I going to find out which Haftorah to read or what's going on? You look at the very end of Rosh Chodesh and you'll see that's where it's brought down. And it talks about which parashos are read together. We all know Vayakov Bakute is read together. If it's not a leap year, we know Matos Maseh is nearly every year read together except every so often. We know that Acharemos Kadoshim and Bahabach Ukosai, these are parashas that usually are read together. Nitzavim Vayelech at the end of the Torah are sometimes read together. But there's one that's read together only in one occurrence. So let's read it out. It says like this. Hold on. To know which parashiyos come together. So I thought you might find this interesting, so I'll read it out. B'shana Peshuta, in an ordinary year, which is not a leap year. Vayake Bakude is always together. Tazria Metzora is always together. Acharemos Kadoshim and Bahabach Ukosai. But it's not a leap year. They are always read together. Now, if you think about it, there are 54 parashios in the Torah. There's 12 in Parshas Bereshis. There's 11 in Shemos. That is 23. There's 10 in Vayikra. There's 10 in Bamidbar. 33, 43. And there is 11 in Devarim, making 54. So you would have thought, 54, that's great. That's 54 weeks in the year, 52 weeks in the year, sorry, forget that. So there's 52 weeks in the year and 54 parashas. But also, we have 2 Shabbosos of Yom Tov. Pesach always has a Shabbos in it, and Sukkot always has a Shabbos in it. So there's at least another 2, which you don't read the parasha of the week, that always have their own laning. So you have at least 4 extra parashios, then you have weeks, which is why we have to join parashios together. So you have 4 that are joined together always in a non-leap year. Vayake Bakude, Tazria Metzora, Acharemos Kadoshim, and Bahabach Ukosai. So those are the 4. Why these are picked together, I'm not quite sure. You can't even say they're small, because Vayake Bakude and Matos Maseh are not small. They're massive. So why these 2 go together, why these particular ones go together, I'm not quite sure. So I wouldn't be one of these rabbis that you could appoint as the head of the Talmudical school, because I don't know the answer to that question. Then it goes on to say, in a leap year, all those are separate, because a leap year has 56 weeks in it. So you need an extra 4 sedras, so those are separate. However, he says like this. He says, but Chukas Balak einam mechubarim. Chukas Balak are never together. Elo kashachol Shavuos b'Shabbos. When Shavuos falls on a Shabbos, second day Shavuos is a Shabbos, so you miss out an extra Shabbos. That means you need to make up one parsha together to make up for this extra week, and they choose Chukas Balak. Why? Because we want to have Pinchas, Matos Maseh, and Devarim are in the 3 weeks. Devarim is always before Tisha B'Av, so we always got to make sure that's before Tisha B'Av. We want to have 3 weeks of the 3 weeks, and there's a whole calculation which I don't want to get too bogged down in now. But Shavuos, when it's a Shabbos, like this year, Shavuos was a Shabbos, in Chutz La'aretz, we add Chukas Balak together. So this year, Chukas Balak is going to be read this Shabbos together. So don't get caught out thinking it's just Chukas. It's 2 parshas this week. So why is it never read in Israel together? Because Israel keep 1 day Shavuos, and the first day Shavuos can never be a Shabbos. It can only be the second day Shavuos that's a Shabbos. So Israel never ever has Shavuos on a Shabbos. So this year, Shabbos, second day Shavuos, was an ordinary day in Israel. So they've been one parsha ahead for the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So therefore, they're catching up this week. They read Chukas last week. They're reading Balak this week. We read Chukas Balak together. So next week, we will be caught up again. When it comes to Parshas Pinchas, Chutz La'aretz and Israel will be back together. So in Israel, they never read Chukas Balak together. And in Chutz La'aretz, they only read it when Shavuos, second day Shavuos is a Shabbos. When second day Shavuos is a Shabbos, it goes on to say Rosh Hashanah is a Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah and Shavuos haven't been a Shabbos since 2008. So therefore, it's been a long time, and it's going to happen a couple of times over the next few years. Next year, also, Pesach is a Sunday, I believe, if my memory is correct. Pesach is a Sunday, Purim is a Friday. So next year, we have an interesting Purim, and in Israel, they have Purim Meshulish. They have this 3 days of Purim spread out over Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. And we have to deal with Erev Pesach being on a Shabbos and having to dispose of our chametz that way. But that obviously we'll discuss, I'm sure, at length nearer the time. So this time, Chukas Balak is together for the first time in 12 years. Now, okay, so then it goes on to say about the other pashas, but we don't want to get too bogged down in it. But I just wanted to read that out. So this week's parsha is Chukas and Balak. Chukas obviously starts with the mitzvah of the Parah Aduma. This is the chok of the Torah, and it goes on to tell you the dinim of the Parah Aduma. Now, maybe I could get the Torah on the screen, and then we could read some of these things together. That might be a good idea. So you'll probably lose my face for a minute while I do this. Okay, so basically, the dinim is, we have to take a Parah Aduma, a cow that's completely red. The cow has to be at least, I think it's 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, can't be a little baby, that's never ever worked, it's never had a yoke put on it, never done a day's work in its life, it's got to be completely red, even 2 black hairs invalidate it, so therefore, it has to be completely red. Hold on, let me get it on screen. Numbers. What chapter numbers is it? Let's see. Parsha, give me a sec. Shalach, Koirach, Chukas. There we go. There we go. Right, let me get it on my screen. Right, now that I have it, let me go back to Zoom, share my screen with you all. Let me share my screen. Where have you all gone? There you are. Right, let's share screen. And we can all see it together. Where's it gone now? Oh, hold on. Give me a sec while I sort out technology. You cannot minimize Zoom when you're recording the meeting. Great, right, okay. I can't minimize Zoom, so where did it go on my computer? Okay. Hold on. It was here a second ago. Hold on. It just disappeared from my computer. I was about to share the screen, and it disappeared. Let's try it again. Hold on. Share screen. No, it's disappeared. Okay, so we'll have to leave that for the moment. Let's see, if I share this, that's just my face on the screen. No, we can't share that. So let's unshare. Stop share, wrong screen. Okay, so the screen seems to have gone from the computer that I'm using. But anyway, so the din is, you take this Parah Aduma, you shecht it, you burn it, you add in hyssop branches, and you add in cedar tree branches, you take spring water, you mix this potion together, and that is what is used to sprinkle on anybody who's become tamei. anybody who's become ritually impure, anybody who wants to come into the Beis Hamikdash, anybody who wants to eat any of these special sacrifices or truma or any of these holy foods, they must be sprinkled on themselves. They got to go to the mikveh, but they have to have this potion sprinkled on them twice on day 3 of their counting and day 7. They have to separate for 7 days on day 3 and day 7, and then they are holy and they can come into the Beis Hamikdash. That is the din of the Parah Aduma. Parah Aduma is a chok. It's very interesting. Why is it a chok? Chok means somebody that we don't understand. The Gemara says that Shlomo HaMelech tried to understand it. He was the wisest of all men. He said, I try to understand it, but it's too far away from me. I don't understand it. It's not something that I can comprehend. It was too delicate. What was too difficult to understand about the Parah Aduma? So the Medrash says there are 4 things in Judaism that are a little bit of a dichotomy. They don't seem to make sense, and they're a chok. They're all called chok, but they don't make sense. One of them is the Parah Aduma. One of them is the mitzvah of Kilayim. The other one is the mitzvah of Yibum, Levirate marriage. And the other one is the animal that we push over the cliff at the end of Yom Kippur that atones for our sins. What is the issue with these things? So says the Medrash, the Parah Aduma made everybody holy, right? Pure. Somebody was impure, somebody was defiled, if you like. He had to go through this process and he became pure. But the person who sprinkled him, he became impure. If you like, he took the impurity from you and brought it on himself. Very strange. Something that makes you pure, why should it make me impure? So it has no conceptual understanding. The same with kilayim. We're not allowed to have wool and linen mixtures. We can't have wool and linen together, except for tzitzis. Tzitzis was supposed to be a woolen garment and linen tzitzis. So therefore, it's kilayim. So how does it make sense? Either we can do it or we can't do it. Why is tzitzis any different? The 4th one is marrying your sister-in-law. It's forbidden to marry your sister-in-law. Your brother's wife is always forbidden. Even if your brother divorces her, or if your brother passes away, that woman is always forbidden. Except if a person's brother dies without children, then not only can you marry her, there's a mitzvah to marry her. There's a mitzvah to marry. Nowadays we practice chalitza, which is a special ceremony. If you don't want to marry her, for whatever reason, then you have to have her take your shoes off, and she spits at you and shouts at you, and we all shout at you, Beis Chalutza now, you don't want to build up the house of your brother, we're not going into that ceremony now. So it doesn't make sense. Either you can marry her, or you can't marry her. What is this thing? And the same with the animal we push off on Yom Kippur. It is the same thing. It makes everybody pure, atones for everybody's sins, but the person who pushes him off, he becomes impure. You know, sometimes as a rabbi, you say, well, it depends. It's not definitively forbidden. Depends on the circumstances. So it's like here, maybe that's what the Torah is trying to tell you. You know, it's not always forbidden. Different circumstances, depends what. But that is certainly the 4 things that don't seem to make sense. So it's a chok. It's completely and utterly beyond our comprehension as to why this makes any sense. So I thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit for a few minutes about the laws of Tumah, connects to the parasha. And also, I want to say, I hope I'm not giving away any state secrets and you're all muted, so you can't shout at me if I'm making a mistake. But it's no secret that our shul are trying, obviously, to find a way that we can daven Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur together, a way that we can come together. You know, it's difficult in the current circumstances, social distancing, whatever. And one of the ideas that were put forward is, those of you who know our community know that there is a funeral home that is located within walking distance near our shul. And the idea is, could we perhaps hire out the funeral home? So that obviously presents halachic difficulties in what is the laws of a Kohen. We know, let's see if I can get this back on screen. Let me try again. Maybe if I hit my computer, it will work. Isn't that how it works? You know, sometimes you hit things and then they work and so on, but no. Okay, so let me try and find this again. Right. Okay, so I think if I do this now, hold on, I've got it on my screen. So where's my zoom gone? Where's my zoom? Where's my zoom icon? Right. So now can I share screen? Hold on. See if I can share it again. Hold on. Let's see if I can do it this time. No. Okay, so let's try it again one more time. Let's go to share screen. Let's see if it will work. No, I can't find it. It's no. Okay, so basically the Torah says like this. I will read it. It says that if somebody dies on the field, they become Tommy. Right, let's read it out. Zois HaTorah, this is the law. Adam ki yamos ba'ohel. If a man or person, a human, dies in a tent, anybody who goes into the tent, and everything in the tent, Yitmo Shivas Yomim, will become Tameh for 7 days. And any earthenware vessel that's not got its lid on, you call it lids in this country, the cap, the top, also becomes Tameh. So we see here that it has to go to the mikvah. You've got to spray the mechatos, this water from the paraduma, on these vessels. So anything that was found in the house where somebody dies, we'll have to have all the vessels sprinkled with this water. So we see quite clearly that anything in the house under the ohel, under the roof, becomes tameh. Says the Rambam, this is a unique din by somebody who dies. Let's give a little bit of an introduction. There is an area of halacha kutuma and tahara, ritual impurity. This may also be a chok, something we don't understand, not something we understand, but the Torah says certain things make somebody impure. Certain types of creepy crawlies, if they die, dead animals, you touch them, you become impure. Some of them you can't, some of them you go to mikvah at that night, and then you can resume your kedusha. A woman, when she's having her period, she becomes a tameh, she's tameh for 7 days, or whatever the rules are. If a person has certain seminal emissions, if a person becomes a zav, which they loosely translate as gonorrhea, or things like that, they become tameh. They become ritually impure. They cannot go into the Beis HaMikdash. They cannot eat teruma, and so on. And certain things, if you touch, will also become tameh. The most severe type of tumah, the highest form of ritual impurity, is a corpse. So somebody who passes away, the body is known as avi avos hatumah, which literally translates as grandfather tumah, because that's the most important. Then after the grandfather comes the father, av hatumah, the father of tumah. So if somebody touches a corpse, they become one level down. Usually, in most cases, it goes down a level. There are many exceptions to that rule. We're not going into that now because it's going to get very complicated. So if you touch a corpse, or if you walk into a room that has a corpse, you become a rishon l'tumah. You become a avatumah. You become a father tumah. And all the clothes that you are wearing also become tameh. If you then go and touch something else, that will become a rishon l'tumah, grade level 1. And that's where, certainly in biblical points of view, that's where tumah stops. Just before we go on with some of the halachos, conceptually, I think it's the Maharal explains, what is this idea of tumah? So he explains that tumah, ritual impurity, is the absence of holiness. It's the absence of kedusha. It's the absence of anything holy. What is the greatest form of ritual impurity? A corpse. Why? Because a person, when they're alive, they have all the potential ability to gain as much spirituality as they can. They can gain, they can do Torah, they can do mitzvos. They can do so much good in spirituality and kedusha. but then when they pass away, they can't do any of that. So that vacuum, that all of a sudden they went from being the height of Kedusha to being that empty vacuum of not being able to have any Kedusha, the biggest differential, that creates a tumor, that is a loss of potential, and that becomes tameh. The same with people who have seminal emissions. These things can be used to create life, which is Kedusha. It's the highest form of Kedusha, and now it's wasted. It's been used for things, or it came out on its own, and it cannot be used for its holy purpose. Therefore, by definition, it's the vacuum of holiness. It makes something tameh. The same when a woman is having a period, she can't conceive children. So because you took something that was so holy, a woman with the ability to make a new life, bring life into the world, is one of the highest forms of Kedusha there is. For a woman to be able to give birth and to bring in new Kedusha, but during that time, and she can't conceive because of the way Hashem has made it, therefore the absence of the vacuum of that Kedusha creates this spiritual impurity. So that's a very basic conceptual understanding of the rules of ritual impurity. But coming back to this, normally to be able to get this tumor, you have to touch something, right? If I touch a corpse, if I touch a woman who's on a period, if I touch somebody who's been into a graveyard, I have to touch them or carry them, and therefore that's how I become tameh. However, there's one exception, and that is a corpse. Because the Torah says, Kol asher ba'oher, there is a special din of being under the same roof. Now, perhaps a way to conceptualize this, you know, we're all talking about this virus, coronavirus, it spreads, the germs are flying around, and you can inhale these germs, or you touch something that has the germs, these germs come in. So that's the way I conceptually understand this tumor. That, you know, if you touch the tumor, it's like you're touching the germs, let's say, and therefore when you touch it, you become defiled because you accept the germs. But some viruses are so potent that even if you just breathe it in, even if you just inhale it, then if you like, you become infected with this ritual tumor. So that's the way I understand it anyway. That's the way I conceptualize it, rather, I should say. So I understand that the Avi Avos HaTumah, the grandfather tumor, is so potent. The germs, if you like, it's spreading throughout the whole room, and therefore anybody who just goes into the room, even for a second, I laugh because the Rambam says, even if you stick in your arm, or, says the Rambam, even if the tip of your nose enters the room, because your nose is the first thing that's the thing that precedes you. Your nose is the most, well, unless people are very fat, and therefore their bellies protrude past their noses, and therefore it is their bellies that are the first thing that walk into a room. But the Rambam was a doctor, and he gave great health advice. As we know, he talks a whole time about healthy diet. He says you should never eat fruit, because fruit is laced with sugar. This is just him. Things may be different nowadays. So the Rambam probably never even entertained the idea of people being so fat that their belly is extended into the room before them. But your nose is usually the first thing that comes in before you. So he says, even if your nose just enters and you see, oh, there's a dead body, I'm going to come out, you still become tameh. So that's the rules of tameh. Is it forbidden to become tameh? The answer is, depends who you are. What does that mean? Any person who's not a Kohen, there's no prohibition of becoming tameh except on Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, on Rosh Hashanah, on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, there's a prohibition of becoming tameh. Why? Because where were the Jews on Yom Tov? They were in the temple, right? They all went up to the Beis HaMikdash. They offered their sacrifices, and if you were tameh, you had to get kicked out. If you look in the Gemara, there was all these tunnels they built underneath the Beis HaMikdash. If people come tameh, they had to literally drop into these tunnels and run off because, you were tameh. You couldn't stay in the Beis HaMikdash if you were tameh. You had to rush out. So there were all these underground tunnels that got you out of Yerushalayim, out of the Beis HaMikdash as quickly as possible. But anyway, so if it's not Yom Tov, an ordinary person has no problem becoming tameh. I can touch a dead body. Yes, it makes me tameh, but it's no prohibition in becoming Tomei. However, there is a prohibition for a Kohen to become Tomei. It says in Parshas Emor, the Nefesh lo yitamo b'amok. A Kohen is not allowed to make himself Tomei with a corpse. Again, a Kohen has to be separate. A Kohen has to be special. A Kohen is on a higher level than ordinary Israel. That's one of the reasons why Korach created such a fuss. Last week, we learned about Korach making his fight with Moshe Rabbeinu because he wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. He wanted to be special. He wanted to have the extra Kedusha. The Kohen had to be ready all the time to go to the Beis HaMikdash to serve Hashem. So he couldn't become Tomei. Not only couldn't he become Tomei, every time you become Tomei as a Kohen, you get a separate sin. What does that mean? Let's say you became Tomei. Whoops, I'm Tomei. Nowadays, everybody is Tomei. You're born in a hospital. The likelihood is at the time that you were born, there was probably, things going on. You're walking all over the place. You're most likely to be Tomei anyway, but there's still a further prohibition to make yourself Tomei again. Person goes to a Beis HaKvaros, a cemetery, says, well, there's no paraduma, I can't cleanse myself, I'm Tomei anyway. So what's the prohibition if I'll go anytime? Answer is no, because every time you make yourself Tomei, you are getting another sin. So we need to understand, especially if we're going to be davening in a funeral home, what is the halacha of a Kohen in a room of a corpse. So I spent this afternoon looking into it, and yesterday, and I spoke to a rabbi, and I have a big shaila that I'm going to tell you about that I'm still waiting to hear back from to see. And we'll discuss it together because it's always good that people understand and know what goes into some of these decision making. So it's clear. There is only a prohibition for a Kohen to go in if the corpse is in the room at the time. If there's no corpse anywhere in the building, there's no problem. Even though the building itself is Tomei, right? Because it also needs to be sprinkled, right? We say you got to sprinkle the, I was about to say the fairy dust, but no, too much watching fairy films with my kids. They're big into fairies. Not the fairy dust. You got to sprinkle the paraduma juice. You got to sprinkle that on the walls and so on. So that's for the kalim. Anyway, but as long as there's no maze there, there's no tumah at the time, no problem whatsoever. So what about if there is tumah in the room? Then of course they can't go in. So the question is, what about multiple rooms within a building, right? So let's say you've got a building and you have multiple rooms. Do they all become tamei if there is a corpse in the room? And this becomes very prevalent, not just for us davening on Rosh Hashanah in a funeral home, which is not very common and so on, but it makes a big difference for Kohanim going into places like hospitals, because especially if a hospital has a morgue and a pathology lab, there's obviously going to be corpses in there. And the question is, does the fact, first of all, if somebody is ill, of course they need to be healed, because doing things to prevent pekuach nefesh, anybody who's ill, they have to go in and be healed, no problem. Question becomes, should a Kohen make special arrangements to go to a private health center? Anyway, I'm not getting into that now. There's many different views about this sort of thing, if you can help it and so on. Whether you can go visit people in a hospital, better not. I know Kohanim don't usually go to visit people in hospitals, so on and so forth. And if they found that, there's a whole shiloh out, can a Kohen be a doctor in a hospital? Because, I mean, you know, he's going to be dealing and in places. But I don't want to get too bogged down in those particular shilohs. I want to stay with what's relevant to us. So the answer is like this. Think of the idea of the virus, right? We said the virus spreads. So the same is with the tumah. If the tumah is in a completely enclosed room where the walls go up to the ceiling and there's no open windows, there's no open doors, that tumah is contained in the room and it doesn't spread. However, if there is a window that opens up into another room, let's say a house, you know, some houses, I don't know if it's common in Florida, but certainly in England, sometimes they used to have the kitchen and the dining room next to each other. There used to be one of these little windows, right, that you could open and you could pass the food straight into the dining room. Right, a little small window. So that window, if you think about it conceptually again, as soon as that window's open, the virus is going to rush in because, oh, I'm waiting at the window. As soon as the window is open, the virus is going to rush in, and therefore that's also no good. The halacha is any window that's 1 tefach by 1 tefach by 1 tefach. A tefach is what? An inch? No, 2 inches, I think. 2 to 2.5 inches. So 2.5 inch squared window, which is not very big. The tumor will get through. Again, you imagine that the tumor is, as soon as there's an opening, the virus is flying through. So that's no good. If the doors are open, of course it's no good because the tumor is going to fly out, right? As soon as you open the door, the tumor is going to fly out. If there's a hole, if the walls do not go up to the roof, right? There's like, like some houses, even my house. I have a partition wall between one side of my house, like the kitchen area and the living area, and my dining room area, but the wall doesn't go all the way to the ceiling. It's what, I don't know, my ceiling is, 12 feet high, and the wall goes up maybe, 8 feet, and there's a 4-foot gap at the top. No good, because if you think about it again with this conceptual idea, the tumor will fly over the wall. So it has to be complete walls. If a mouse makes a hole, then that's okay, because it's got to be a human-made hole. It's interesting, what about a hole that you know exists and you refuse to patch it up? That's another story. But any hole that's made by a mouse or mold, and there's a little hole that you didn't make, that's why I said this conceptual idea isn't true, because it's a halachic idea, not a physical idea. Because if it's a physical idea, even if there's a small little hole, the virus, the tumor could get in. What difference does it make if I made the hole or a mouse made the hole? But halachically, it's got to be a man-made hole. So if there's like a mouse makes a hole in a wall, or if you have, let's say, sometimes, the electric companies or the telephone companies, right? They make a hole, they run the cables in this little hole, but that hole is smaller than the 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, then you're okay, especially if the wire in the middle will block off the tumor. You can, by the way, put things in holes to stop the tumor coming in. So we've established if the tumor is in a completely enclosed, locked room, then the tumor doesn't escape. However, it's not so simple. Nothing ever is in Yiddishkeit, of course. And that is, there is a din called Soif Tumor Lotzes. And I was looking at this. I used to be a rabbi in a nursing home, a chaplain, so we had to know about this. We had 2 stories, downstairs and upstairs. So normally if a tumor is upstairs, that's in its enclosed space, it wouldn't impact people downstairs. And if there was a tumor downstairs, you could be upstairs, assuming the doors, there was no open staircase where everything would just fly through. Because otherwise then you have the same idea, it sort of flies up. If you have a staircase that's got its own doorway, then it would, like in the old age home, everything was on a separate door and everything with fire doors in between, then the upstairs was separate. So the question is, Soif Tumor Lotzes, which is the way that the corpse is going to come out, got to take it out of the room, you got to take it out of the building, because it's ultimately going to come out that way, that will automatically make that pathway tummy, even though the corpse is not there now. So example, you've got your tumor in the locked door in a separate room. Very nice. But that tumor's got to come out of that room. It's going to go into the hallway out the door. So even though the tumor is now in the locked room, let's say the person was living in the locked room and died in the locked room, so he's never stepped foot out. Well, dead bodies don't step foot out, but he's never been carried unless he turns into a ghost. Maybe if you become a ghost, you lose your sense of tumor, because once you become a ghost, I don't know. But going back to reality now, if he dies in the locked room, so he's never been brought out yet, so the tumor has never escaped, but because he obviously has to come out of that door and through the hallway to the front door, all that area is already considered tummy. So what happens if you have 2 exits? Again, then it doesn't become tummy, because you say, well, he's going to go out that way, and I can come in this way. So in a funeral home, when we go there and we have to look, you have to see which room are they going to keep let's say there's a corpse there over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which room are they going to keep them in? Let's say it's going to be a room over there. Great, locked away. But what happens if you say, well, think about it. Which way is he going to come out? Because if he's going to come out through the entranceway, then it's no good for a Kohen, because even though the corpse is locked away, the fact that it's going to come out that way means a Kohen cannot come in that way in the first place. If they have a back door that they can sneak out, I say sneak out, but they can take the corpse out the back way without coming through the main area where the chapel is, that's okay. So here was my shaila that I phoned at the basin up north, and I'm still waiting for an answer. Here's my shaila. A funeral home, where do they conduct their funerals? In the chapel. What do they do with these funerals? They bring the corpse, the coffin, into the chapel. So even though you don't have to go out through the chapel because they can take him out the other door at the side, but because we know that because they're a funeral home and that's what they do, they make funerals, people take the corpse, they put it in the chapel and have a ceremony with the coffin there in the chapel. If there is a corpse in the facility, does the fact that they're going to have a service and bring it in, surely that would be a problem. So I'm waiting to, I've asked that question and I'm waiting for answers on high, as they say, because if that's the case, that will basically mean that unless we can guarantee that there is somehow that they will agree that even if they have a corpse that's already there, they'll somehow move him to another funeral home and they won't accept bodies over Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Not saying they will or they won't, I have no idea, but unless they can guarantee that, the Kohanim won't be able to attend if there is a corpse. Now, of course, it might be they don't have a corpse, but again, that's a question for other people to decide. I don't think that should happen. You don't want to have a minyan where you might be worried within 5 minutes, or you could start the davening and all of a sudden they get a body in the middle and then you're stuck. So that is the question I'm waiting to decide about whether this funeral home presents a problem for Kohanim. So even with other things about mechitzas and having to worry about how to put up a mechitza, you still have to think when you come to a funeral home, what's going to happen with the corpse. What time is it? Oh, it's 8:15. So I did have a bit more to say about things, but I think we'll stop here. So just to summarize, because we've covered a little bit and I understand it might get confusing. Ordinary people, there is no prohibition about becoming tummy. No prohibition about touching a corpse. There's no prohibition about becoming tummy in a graveyard. The prohibition is you cannot go into the Beis HaMikdash. You have to have this ceremony, this potion from the Parah Adumah sprinkled all over you. But a Kohen, I should say that this is one of the 3 negative commandments that do not apply to women. The Mishnah in Kedushin says normally women are excluded from all time-bound positive commandments, but they have to keep every one of the 365 negative commandments except these 3. They're allowed Kohanic women, I don't know if that's the right phrase, I don't know, Kohenesses, right? Either girls born to a Kohen or married to a Kohen that can eat terumah, they can eat the special food a Kohen can eat. There's no prohibition for a Kohenes to go into a cemetery. There's also no prohibition for a woman to cut her payas. A woman can cut her payas, and if a woman does grow a beard, there is no prohibition for a woman to completely destroy her beard. So I don't know if people wax their beards, I don't know. A man is forbidden to wax his beard because you're not allowed to destroy your beard. There are certain shavers that you're allowed to have that don't cut close to the skin. But those are the 3 prohibitions that women are excluded from. Again, they don't have to worry about coming into contact with tumah if they're a Kohen, and no women have to worry about cutting off their payas or cutting off their beard. But all other 362 prohibitions, women are obligated to keep. I'll just finish off with this thought, quite a morbid thought, but you'll take it as it is. Talking about a funeral home for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You know, obviously we're davening for life, right? That's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You're davening for life. The books of life and death are open. So we try and make symbolism, right? We do the symbolizing things. You dip the things into the honey to have a sweet year. But we also do things to remind us of death. We wear a kittel. Why do we wear a kittel? A kittel reminds us of death because that's what they put dead people in. They put them in a kittel. The last thing they put them in is a kittel. And therefore we want to remember, death. Yes, we need to daven. We need to really subdue ourselves before Hashem. So maybe davening in a funeral home will be perfect because there's no greater symbolism. There's no greater way of people thinking, oh yes, we've got to remember the books of life and death are open. We've got to daven for our lives. We've got to pray to Hashem. We've got to connect with him. There's no better place to do that if you think about it than a funeral home. It will certainly bring the atmosphere of what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur should be. So with that, I will end the recording and I will